Highlighting the desperate plight of the street kids now on BBC One, Michelle Collins in Brazil.
Maya, where's Mummy going tomorrow?
Brazil.
Yeah? And what am I going to do in Brazil?
Help poor children.
I am going to really miss you. You're going to miss me? It's only a week and it's not like I'm going off on a holiday and sunbathing. 2. All my friends seem to think, oh, great Brazil, you know. Carnival, Rio, Bossa Nova, 4 trainers. It's not going to be a holiday and it's going to be really hard work. I mean, I've got the schedule here, which is just unbelievable. I've been invited to come to Brazil by Oxfam to raise awareness about their long-term work with disadvantaged communities in the northeast of Brazil and their projects to combat poverty of education and get children into school. Jessica, Oxfam's representative here in the city of Recife, is my translator and guide. I'm going to be tagged by a press pack all week. Hopefully their stories will alert people back home to what's going on. Sadly, these days, you know, lots of things have become quite celebrity-based. I mean, I say sadly, but then in some ways, if, you know, it takes a celebrity, I hate that word, or takes someone like me to make people watch, then, you know, that's just the way it is. I suppose I'm quite high-profile. There's no point in taking at anyone who's not high-profile. And the whole idea is to get press, to get media attention, and to make people look. This year is Brazil's 500th birthday. 5 centuries after the Portuguese first set foot on these shores, Brazil is amongst the 10 richest countries in the world. But in many ways, there's little to celebrate. No other nation has a wider gap between rich and poor. About 50 million people live below the poverty line, almost as many as live in Britain. And at the bottom of the heap are the kids living on the streets. Many of these street children have fled their homes because of domestic abuse. Most are mixed up in drugs, prostitution and petty crime. There are 8 million of these kids on the streets of Brazil, and the majority of them are addicted to sniffing glue. Oxfam's main priority is to get these kids into school, but in Brazil they have another, highly efficient way of dealing with the problem. In Brazil, street kids are killed as casually as rats. At least 4 children a day are murdered by off-duty police, vigilantes or security firms, often hired by local businessmen to cleanse the streets of petty criminals. Here in the city of Recife alone, half a dozen kids are eliminated every month. On our first day, we were taken to meet some of these kids by a local charity. Some of the social workers were street kids themselves. Today they're being taught capoeira, a Brazilian martial art developed over centuries by African slaves. Many of these children do have homes to go to, but often their home life seems worse than living on the streets. Let me see what he's drawing, a house and a tree. And 23, is that the number of your house? Yeah. After years living rough, Adair has been persuaded to go home at night, but still spends the day on the streets sniffing glue.
It's It's better to be at home than on the streets because they've killed a lot of people already. They kill a lot of people around here. The number of his house...
The social workers bring paper and pencils out onto the street, but haven't managed to get him back to school. He's not alone. 30% of all Brazilian children drop out of primary school.
I can smell the glue. Some people treat me well.
Julio broke his arm when he fell off a bus, trying to catch a free ride. He's the only surviving brother out of a family of 4. One died of fever, and the other 2 were shot dead.
See, you know, sometimes we're sleeping in the streets and they set fire to us. When we're sleeping, they come and harm us at night.
Why do people set fire to them?
Olha, queridos. He says that it's just pure spite. They come and they piss on them, they set fire to them, they beat them, they pee on them. This is a bad life, Auntie, because you get into sniffing glue. There's a lot of killing. Getting to sniffing glue, there's a lot of killing. There's robbing, stealing, hurting other people. It's not a good life.
Cleverson left home when he was 6 and hasn't seen his mother since. Does he miss her?
Você sente falta dela? I miss her, but I'm not going home. I'll stay on the streets.
Recife is the main city in the northeast of Brazil and has a thriving tourist economy. That night we went out for a drink in the town centre, which is packed with tourist bars. I felt like I was in a different planet. There wasn't a street kid in sight.
Well, the street kids are being taken away from this area. Basically now there's a curfew that starts at 9 o'clock and all the children are removed from this area, and barriers, you can see them around here, are put up. They're physically removed by the police to make sure that when the tourists arrive around 9:30, 10 o'clock, there are no children here for them to see. Street children are seen as objects, almost like vermin. If you can get rid of them, then you're doing society a service. This is how it's seen, rather than trying to reach out to the children and trying to find out why they're there in the first place and maybe trying to get them off the streets.
Thankfully, as I discovered the next day, there are organisations trying to get the kids off the streets in a more humane way. Now we're going to the Casa Menina Mula, which is, I suppose, the equivalent, like a safe house for young girls. Not only do they live on the streets, these girls, lots of them have been abused. The idea is for them to gain confidence, to meet other people going through the same experiences as them. It's all very arts-based. They have lots of music, dancing, craft. Sakuru Malafaya is the director of this project. While we were welcomed to the dance, she told me that 5 of the girls are pregnant.
When I started working at the centre, I spoke to my family about what I was doing. I told them a little bit about my work, and initially they were very shocked. And in fact, my brother-in-law said that the solution to these girls, the problems of these girls, would be to line them up against the wall and shoot them. I don't know why it happens. I can't tell you why these children are still being murdered, but my guess is it's to eliminate the children. You have an attitude that they're not working, that they're smoking, that they're taking drugs. Then they're in the favelas, and there are big fights between the drug lords, and a lot of adolescents get into fights because of drug trafficking and what's happening in the favelas. And basically the death squads are formed to eliminate the children who are on the street, and very often the police are involved as well.
One of the conditions of coming here is that the girls have to go to school. But the irony is that sometimes they're prevented from going, even when they want to. One girl can't go to school simply because she hasn't got a birth certificate. In Brazil, if you don't officially exist, then you simply don't get the chance to learn to read or write. I miss my little girl's kisses like that. Oh, yeah. In England, we say cheese. Cheese. The next day, we left Recife and travelled inland. Among the people most discriminated against in Brazil are the people who were here first. 500 years ago, about 5 million Indians lived here. Today, after centuries of colonial persecution and disease, they're down to about 300,000. Marquinhos de Assis Araújo is only 21 years old. He's the chief of the Chucuru tribe, one of the largest indigenous nations in Brazil, and one of the few surviving outside the Amazon rainforest. But when we arrived to visit Marquinhos, we found the road blocked. A local landowner had illegally sold off a portion of Shukuru territory, including the reservoir, their key supply of water. As a result, the entire village had moved down to the main road in protest.
You're very courageous. Yes, I'm starving.
Sim, ela tá com muita fome.
Só pouquinho, por favor. Tá bom. Muito obrigada. This is manioc flour. It's called farinha, and it doesn't have much taste, but it's very typical.
So we know this is a temporary place. When did the protests start?
They've been here for a week.
And is it peaceful?
It's completely peaceful. It's always peaceful, yes. They're just not letting any of the big landowners go through the roadblock.
So they just came and took it without warning, without...
The company that is in the town down there sold a piece of it without warning them, and claims that they own it, and they sold it off. And so the Indians are then now without water, so they're blocking it.
But they don't want to cut the village off with water because those aren't the people that they're trying to...
No, that's right. They're not trying to affect the local population. They want the local population on their side.
It's the rich, fat cat landowners they want to get at.
That's right. So those are the people they're not letting through.
So what's going to happen? How long do you think they're going to be here?
They're going to be here until something is resolved on their land. They're
and
quite
what do you think
determined.
is going to happen?
It'll probably be quite a long legal battle, I expect. Another one, you know. They're struggling for their land anyway, so...
The Indian struggle to regain ancestral tribal lands is fraught with difficulty and soaked in blood. It was only 12 years ago that the Brazilian constitution recognised that Indians are legal adults, let alone have their own cultural identity. The question of land, of course, is the most problematic. All Indian territory should have been demarcated by now and the appropriate payments made to local landowners. But most tribes are still waiting. Marquinhos' father, Chicao, was a hugely influential figure in the fight for Indian human rights. He was assassinated 2 years ago. So far, no one has been charged with his death, and the lawyer assisting him with his legal battles was also murdered.
It was a gunman who was sent by a farmer who owned land here in the indigenous area.
Do you live in fear of your life?
Você também teme por sua vida?
Sim.
Yes.
Temo.
Yes, I do.
That night, the Shukuru performed an ancient ceremonial dance to ask for strength and help with their struggle. They have lost many of their customs and traditions over the centuries, and is part of a new cultural awareness that they're trying to teach their children pride in their heritage. I wish I'd dressed up now. After talking about death threats and assassinations all day, I got the fright of my life when everyone suddenly ran for cover. But it was just a storm.
He's worried because the window of the truck is open, and that's his bed. That's where he sleeps. So he says, "Oh dear, my bed's getting wet."
Feeling rather guilty, we left the Shukuru camped in the rain at the roadside. We'd been invited to spend the night in the chief's empty house. It was freezing in the night, absolutely freezing. And Rachel and Claire from Oxfam slept over there. And apparently I was talking in my sleep, and so was Rachel, and we were having conversations with each other. And I said things like, "What do you want me to say here?" So, you know, I just take my job home with me. But it was fun actually. It's like going to camp again. And they were really, and I think we should all feel quite honoured that they've let us stay in their house, because they're basically down there where the protest is, sleeping under plastic bin liners and absolutely freezing cold. But it's been an adventure. It really has. Someone's got to empty the toilet.
I'll do it. Yeah, right.
The Indians aren't the only ones struggling for land in Brazil. A staggering 1% of landowners own almost half the country. And although Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world, millions of people have nowhere to live. But the homeless farmers of Brazil are fighting back by squatting. Brazilian law allows the government to confiscate and redistribute unproductive land. They're not, however, usually very forthcoming, which is where the Movimento Sem Terra, or landless movement, steps in.
They try and get the government to give them legal title to that land, as enshrined in the Constitution. So what happens is they go onto the land and build these shacks, as we can see around us, and they wait for the government to come and do a survey to check that they can have the land. But what also happens is the landowner will come in and will contest their claim to the land. So what's happened to this community is the landowner is claiming that it's his land and therefore has evicted them 4 times. They have the right to land, providing it's abandoned. We have 5 million families that are dying of hunger on the streets of Brazil, and they could come here and plant rice. And here they have a chance of survival, they have a chance to educate their children, and they have a chance to provide for themselves. And the ultimate aim is that they'll own the land and they'll own their own home. And this is the dream that sustains them. We don't have beds, so we sleep on the floor. And when the rain comes through, we just stand up and wait for the rain to stop and for the land to dry before we can sleep. As soon as we get the land, we're going to build our homes, we're going to build them of brick, and we're going to get our land to work the land and grow plants.
Ask her what her dream is.
Qual é o teu sonho? Se você pudesse ter o seu sonho realizado, que seria?
A minha casa própria.
To have my own home is my dream.
This one or this? See? Thank you. 68 families have been living here for a couple of years, but it often takes up to 10 years to resolve these land questions. There's no official school, but the children who would otherwise be child labourers cutting sugarcane are taught the alphabet every day under a mango tree. This is a donation from us to say thank you for letting us come here today, especially for the boys and girls.
Peraí pouquinho.
It's from
Isso
David Beckham.
É para...
1, 2, 3. Whoa! Sorry. Life is incredibly precarious here, but at least these people live in hope. The alternative would be to join the ever-increasing numbers of desperate people swelling the overflowing slums in the city. In the cities, the homeless have clawed space out of nowhere, creating sprawling slums known as favelas. In Recife alone, there are 600 of these favelas, notorious rubbish heaps of poverty, crime, and hunger. It's a terrible irony that although Brazil exports more food than any other country in the world, apart from the US, malnutrition causes almost 7 out of every 10 deaths in children under 5. And as I discovered early that week, those that do survive often end up living on the streets. Another project sends kids out of the city slums to live on a farm in the country. Before I went there, I went into the favelas to meet the mothers of some of the kids. Irene lives here with 9 others. None of them earn a wage. Her husband left long ago. Her son, Jadson, who is now safe at the farm, used to help support his family by begging, but started sniffing glue when he was 11 and began staying out in the streets. Last year, his friend was shot dead, while Jadson slept beside him.
I love it when he's there because he's safe. Here, when he's back at home, I don't sleep at night. When I hear a gunshot in the shanty towns, I always think it's my son who's been shot. I think that if he stays going to the farm at Capim-Lixeiro, he's got a chance. He's got a chance of a future. But if he stays on the streets, there are going to be 2 endings for him, either the cemetery or jail.
Desgosto porque criar filho mesmo sem pai, né? E deu pra isso.
She feels a lot of despair because she didn't want her child to suffer like this. She doesn't feel anguish, she just feels despair and anguish. Yeah.
We were about to go into someone else's house, but it looks like it might not be safe for us to go. There's been a rumour that there's gunmen around the corner. So everyone's a bit sort of on edge, even though everyone sort of seems pretty happy, but I don't know, it doesn't feel quite right. And Antonio, who's with us, looks a bit uneasy. It was decided that it was too dangerous in there to go and visit another mother because I think sort of word got round, and there's very few cars that ever go in there, and I think it would have kicked off any minute, and it was scary. It was quite scary, and I feel a bit sick actually. It all seems quite nice on the surface, and then suddenly someone pulls out a gun or
It takes one of their nasty...
just rob us.
Yeah.
But the streets and squares are very well respected here.
Yeah, and they don't want to lose that respect. So they don't want to.
They know when it's
that.
how far you can go, and when it's
When it's time to say goodbye.
When it's time to say goodbye. Also, they
Mrs. Santana has a son, Oscar, who is also at the farm. But she is most worried about her daughter, who has turned to prostitution and disappeared onto the streets with a drug gang.
We worry about her more than Oscar. Both she and Oscar were on drugs, on smelling glue, but we're just waiting for the news to arrive any minute now that she's dead and that she's buried.
É por isso que eu não quero que Oscar venha para aqui.
That's why I don't want.
Tá muito problema.
I don't want Oscar to come back from the farm at this moment because there's a lot of trouble here.
But tell her she should feel positive because at least Oscar is a success. Tell her I'm looking forward to meeting him.
Ela vai conhecer Oscar amanhã e tá desejosa, doida para conhecer ele.
É maravilhoso ele.
I'll put him in his place. The next day, we're off to the countryside, to the Capim-Lixeiro farm. Well, apart from seeing what it's like, because I've heard so much about it, I'm really looking forward to meeting Oscar and, is it Jedson?
Jedson, yeah.
Jedson. Now I've met their mums.
It'll be brilliant.
And to talk to them about, what it's like for them.
I think it'll be a good contrast between the children that you met yesterday and then to see how they're doing here in the centre. And you'll see that they are less jittery than the children we've met. They'll have had 4 days without sniffing glue.
Right,
Hello.
where's Oscar and where's Jedson?
Pois é.
Where's
Você
Oscar?
pode encontrar Jadson para mim e Oscar.
Eu.
É você, Jadson? Esta é Michelle.
Tudo bom, Michelle?
Bon dia. Oh, and a kiss. Tell him I met his mum yesterday.
Ela conheceu tua mamã ontem. Ela manda um cheiro para você.
She sends you lots of kisses.
É da mamã. Olha, esses beijinhos não são dela. É da tua mamã. Michelle. Vem conhecer a Michelle. Tudo bem?
They're very polite,
A
these
gente
boys.
esteve lá na sua casa.
What's your name? The lucky ones who come to the farm are selected by a combination of social workers and the street kids themselves. On the farm, drugs are banned and school is compulsory. They also learn how to work in the fields. Telling me he's very beautiful.
Ela tá dizendo que você é muito bonito. This one is good to eat.
So who's hungry? We're having lunch.
Quem tem fome? Vocês querem almoçar?
Yeah? Hungry? Come on then. Oh, yes. But the best bit is that the kids get to eat 3 square meals a day. Do they make their own food as well?
They make their own food, yeah. And most of the
cook,
things here
like on a rota.
are from. They've got a cook, but they'll be taught how to cook as well.
Well, you're glad. They're definitely bigger, aren't they? They're definitely bigger.
Away from the glue.
Their behaviour is they just seem quite normal now, don't they?
And calm.
And their eyes are just sort of quite normal and not sort of trance-like.
Apparently we've all got to go and wash our own plates.
Well, this is. I'd like some. This is what they teach them. So if we don't wash our plates, then it'll look really weird.
The kids stay here for varying periods of time. The first time Jadson went back home, he fell in with his mates and went straight back to his old ways, sniffing glue and throwing stones at his mother. This time, though, he's chosen to stay for longer. Oscar has been here for a couple of years. He's 16 now and ready to leave the farm. He's a changed man. Why is he a different man?
Por que você é homem diferente? Como é que você mudou?
Porque eu lutei pra ser
He's
diferente.
a changed man, and he's a different person now, and he's left all the things behind. When he was on the street, there was a lot of violence. He was raped. He used to steal things. He used to break into people's houses. He used to take a lot of drugs. It was a very different life. He was a very different person
No
then.
meio da rua, tá debaixo da terra, né?
I'd be under the
Comendo
ground. I'd
areia.
be buried.
Só os ossos.
Eating sand. I'd only be a
Tá
bag of
mais no mundo,
bones.
fazendo o quê? Tava mais no mundo, não.
I
Minha
wouldn't
vida
be
era
alive
outra.
anymore. My life was a different life then.
Isso aqui foi minha salvação.
This was my salvation.
Eu vivia mesmo na pesada mesmo.
I've been shot at, and I managed to escape. They nearly shot me in the eye. It was a guard. It was a night guard that shot at me.
Antes eu me sentia mal, assustado. Hoje não, eu me sinto liberto como um pássaro.
Before I
A
used to
vida
be,
ganha, liberto, forte, com saúde.
I used to
Só tá muito que eu
feel.
fumo e bebo.
I used to feel scared. I used to feel very scared. But now I feel like a bird. I'm completely free.
Please let me have the ball. Playing football very badly with these kids, I couldn't help thinking that if they hadn't had the opportunity to come here, they might well be dead by now. Thank you. I feel very tired, but then I know everyone does because it's been a long week and I feel a bit weary. It's nice to sit down actually on a beach, a sandy beach. It just feels a bit odd because I'm just sort of used to sort of being on the dark side of town, I suppose. And I suppose this is how I thought Brazil was really, until I came to Brazil.